is considered the best in the world, and we're very proud of that fact.
Next, Minnesota Governor Jesse Ventura. Yesterday, he gave a luncheon address at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., where he talked about his style of governing. During a question and answer session, he commented on his relationship with the press, President Bush's tax plan, and the future of the XFL. It's 1 hour.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the National Press Club. My name is Richard Ryan, and I am Senior Washington Correspondent for the Detroit News and President of the National Press Club. I'd like to welcome club members and their guests in the audience today, as well as those of you who are watching on C-SPAN or listening to this program on National Public Radio. The video archive of today's luncheon is provided by Connect Live and is available through the National Press Club website at npc.press.org. National Press Club luncheons are also carried live by many sites on the World Wide Web. Press Club members may also access transcripts of our luncheons at our website. Non-members may purchase transcripts, audio, and videotapes by calling 1-888-343-1940. If you have any questions for our speaker, please write them on the cards that are provided at your table and then pass them up to me, and I will ask as many as time permits. Before introducing our head table today, I would like to remind our members of upcoming speakers. On Tuesday, March 6th, Michael Kaiser, President of the Kennedy Center, will be our guest. On Thursday, March 8th, Her Majesty Queen Noor of Jordan will speak on her work with the Landmine Survivors Network. And on Friday, March 9th, John Walsh, host of America's Most Wanted television program, will speak on constitutional rights for victims of crime. I'd now like to introduce our head table guests and remind them to stand briefly when their names are called. Please hold your applause until all head table guests are introduced. From your right and my left, Mike Bold, Washington News Editor, McClatchy Newspapers. Arthur Bernstein, Vice President, United Sports Fans of America. Emily Murray, TV producer, CBN News. Bill Ranger, Director of the State of Minnesota's Washington office. Darcy McConnell, Washington's correspondent for the Detroit News. Al Isley, editor of The Hill. Terry Ventura, the wife of our speaker. David Hess, Chairman of the National Press Club Speakers Committee and former President of the Press Club. And skipping over our speaker for the moment, we have Greg Gordon, Washington correspondent, Minneapolis Star-Tribune, and the Speakers Committee member who organized today's luncheon. Thank you, Greg. John Woodley, the Governor's Director of Communications. Mary McGrory, columnist, The Washington Post. Tom Webb, Washington correspondent, St. Paul Pioneer Press. Jack Cushman, New York Times weekend editor and former president of the National Press Club. Finley Lewis, Washington correspondent, Copley Newspapers. I'd like to note that Finley Lewis and our speaker today had the same swimming coach in high school in Minneapolis. Our speaker went on to become the governor of Minnesota. Mr. Lewis went on to become a California raisin in a gridiron show of a few years back. Welcome, Governor, to the House of Jackals. For those of you who haven't been paying close attention, our guest today, Minnesota Governor Jesse Ventura, is locked in another battle with the Minnesota Press Corps. This time it is over press credentials. Last week, the governor's office declared that reporters covering the governor must wear credentials, proclaiming them official jackals. This is a takeoff from the governor's recent book, Do I Stand Alone? going to do the mat against political pawns and media jackals. The media have no excuse for the way they've treated me, the governor wrote. They smelled blood in the water, and they've been circling ever since, ready to go on the attack whenever they see an opening. Sounds more like sharks than jackals, but no matter. Minnesota reporters have not considered the title official jackal to be a term of endearment. Some have rebelled, to which Governor Ventura has replied with his customary directness, "Go stick your head in the mud." But one thing everyone knows about the governor, he doesn't back down. The current dispute with the press is only the latest controversy to befall the governor since he shocked the political world in 1998 by winning the governorship as the Reform Party candidate. That victory was so unexpected, in fact, that CBS anchor Dan Rather was moved to comment at the time. The people of Washington could not be more surprised if Fidel Castro came loping across the Midwestern prairie on the back of a hippopotamus. Governor Ventura created a furor in 1999 when he proclaimed in an interview published in Playboy magazine that, quote, organized religion is a sham and a crutch for weak-minded people who need strength in numbers. He raised questions about his commitment to governing Minnesota when he accepted moonlighting jobs as a wrestling referee and as color commentator for the new XFL Football League. Now 49, Governor Ventura has had a colorful career. After graduating from high school, he joined the Navy and became a member of its elite SEAL team, serving in top-secret missions in Vietnam. He later was a member of a California motorcycle gang, the Mongols, and served briefly as a bodyguard for the Rolling Stones. He gained fame as a bad guy professional wrestler, although one reporter recalled that Ventura's best move was, and I quote, standing on the apron, yelling at the fans while his tag team partner did all the work. As a professionally wrestling announcer, his favorite line was, win if you can, lose if you must, but always cheat. Governor Ventura also has been a movie actor, performing in such movies as Batman and Robin, Demolition Man, The Running Man, and Predator, in which he uttered the immortal line, now the title of his latest book, I Ain't Got Time to Bleed. While Governor Ventura may be controversial, the people of Minnesota still love him. A recent Minneapolis Star-Tribune poll showed him with a 71% approval rating. He has been able to work with Minnesota's divided legislature to cut taxes and raise education spending. He has been talked about as a potential vice presidential and even presidential candidate. When Governor Ventura agreed to become color commentator for the XFL Football League, he described it as another job. We're here to have a good time, he said then. Well, Governor, I hope you are here at the National Press Club to have a good time, because I know your audience is. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Governor Jesse Ventura to the National Press Club.
There's that thing there. They showed me how to work this, so I got to try it out. There we go. Good afternoon. I don't know, last time did I utter Arnold's words, I'll be back? But it is good to be back, and I want to take a moment, though, and give credit where it's due, you know, in Minnesota. I'm going to go with some prepared remarks, and I'll do some ad-libbing in there, but really I'll get to your questions, and I think I'd enjoy that the most right now, is just fielding the questions and talking from there. But I do love to give credit where it's due. Just as I have a top-notch cabinet in Minnesota that I give a lot of credit to, they make your job that much easier. They weren't accurate or good to my Director of Communications, John Woodley, because John really is the one who spearheaded and was the brainchild of the media jackals and the press passes. So I want John to get full credit for that. He does a great job for me. And then, of course, I look down to the left and see my old teammate from the Frogman days. How did you get to the front table, Mr. Ranger?
I behaved, sir.
Oh, good. All right. No, it's always nice to see Bill. Bill and I actually went through Bud's training together, basic underwater demolition SEAL team, and served together for many, many years. Have been friends for a long time. It's kind of like a roast. I might go right down the line here, huh? And get them all. But it's always good to see him, and he works for me now in Washington and does an outstanding job. It's been about 2 years since I stood at this podium after I won the shocking election of 1998. And a lot of controversy has gone down since then, hasn't it? It's gone over the dam, but it still feels good. And thank you very much, sincerely, for inviting me back. But I do want to tell you what I've given up to be here today. All the governors are meeting with Mr. Greenspan right now. And I certainly hope my economic situation in Minnesota doesn't suffer because I jumped in with a bed of jackals. So you all may be to blame again for something, who knows. But I'm not going to talk long. As I said today, I've got some prepared remarks I'll start off with, but I'd rather spend most of my time answering your questions, I think. In 2 years, I'm not sure which controversy is it that interests you the most. That's a tough decision to make and come out here and single one out, maybe. You probably, as you heard, may be interested in that old Playboy interview. Although I did hear that the interviewer that interviewed me, Bobby Knight, kicked him out of the car the other day or something. Same guy. Coach Knight gave him the boot right onto the pavement. I heard something to that effect. So I'm not as volatile as Bobby Knight. Or maybe I'm jealous. Anyway, or maybe it's the 2 books I've written so far. Or maybe what you'll be interested in is whether I'm going to run for re-election in the state of Minnesota 2 years from now. Or maybe you're interested in whether I plan to run for the presidency in 2004. Or you might be interested in my relationship with the media jackals. We could explore that. Or how about the XFL? That's another topic to talk about. Or maybe some of you that don't normally come to this during the day may be interested in my cameo appearance on The Young and the Restless. After all, the media chose to cover that far more than when I testified in front of Congress to open trade with China. You be the judge. Which affects more people in Minnesota more? Trade with China, which I believe is could have the biggest economic impact on our country for this century, or Jesse Ventura sitting down with Victor Newman, planning on what dastardly thing we might do next. I don't know, but the media seemed to feel The Young and the Restless carried the weight far more. We had to bring him in 3 shifts. Only one TV station from Minnesota saw fit to come out to Washington when I testified in front of Congress. So, jackal, only you know for sure when you look in the mirror. Oh, and don't forget SummerSlam. That caused controversy. I actually went back and refereed a wrestling match that I'd done for many, many years. But I do tend to keep busy. But I will tell you this, I'm never not too busy to govern. That is my utmost priority. A lot of people, you know, have criticized me and said governing is a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week, 365-day-a-year job. How can a governor work on Saturday night and moonlight? In fact, there's a pending bill in Minnesota that's being dealt with in committee. It passed out of committee to ban me from doing that. Last I checked, this was the United States of America, wasn't it? Last time I checked, this was a country that loved freedom. I think ultimately, isn't it the voters of Minnesota who ought to make that choice, not the legislature? I think so. And for a moment, let me take you back in my history, and Mr. Ranger, I think, can concur with me. Isn't serving on active duty in the United States Navy a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week, 365-day-a-year job, Bill? Would you concur? Absolutely. Yet, why did they let me hold second jobs? I used to hold a second job when I was stateside in the military to earn more money, to provide more money, because we all know enlisted men in the military don't get paid a lot. Hopefully President Bush is going to solve that a little bit. A lot of people are wondering whether tripartisan government in Minnesota would work. Having a governor, independent, third party, having a House that's Republican, a Senate that's Democrat, I think it's working very well. Last year, at my urging, the legislature passed and we broke ground for our first light rail transit in the state of Minnesota. You're very used to it out here. It takes Minnesotans a while to adapt and understand how important the metro is to Washington, D.C. Imagine for a moment if you didn't have it. What would it be like here? Well, all our cities are facing that now, even out west. And it's bold steps like that in creating the way people think different that a governor has to do. You have to look 20 years ahead, not one election ahead. We've been working real hard to sell the state of Minnesota itself. In fact, in the last 2 years, tourism in Minnesota has increased and is now a $10 billion industry equal to agriculture. And I've helped, because people come to Minnesota, they want to take a look at who elected me. Also, in the last 2 years, we've reduced taxes in Minnesota by $2 billion, and we've sent sales tax rebates back to the citizens that amounted to almost $2 billion. And in fact, I gave that recommendation to President Bush this morning. I said I felt the tax cuts were tremendous, but that if he really wanted to inject a quick fix into our economy, maybe a tax rebate would be even better. A check in the hand. And I told the president, I said, it's also good politically, Mr. President. They're now referred to in Minnesota as Jesse checks. I tried to get my picture on the check, but they wouldn't allow that. And we've been working on future initiatives also in Minnesota. I say we because I have a tremendous cabinet, and, you know, that old saying is true. You're only as good as the people you have around you. And I have some very, very extremely talented people around me, and we've been working on things like cutting-edge tax reform that would adapt Minnesota's tax system into this new economy. Property tax relief for farmers, senior citizens, and businesses. In my budget, double-digit relief. Reforming the way we pay teachers and seeking accountability for the tax dollars we spend on education. And believe me, tell me it doesn't take political courage to take on the most powerful lobby in Minnesota, if not America, the education system. But I think you have to ask for accountability when you look at what's happened in Minnesota. And even though our education system is one of the best in the nation in public education, we still have to look, because in the last 10 years, the price of that education has jumped 100.7% in 10 years. I think they owe the accountability. Are they getting the job done? Are children graduating smarter today than they did 10 years ago? We need to look at those types of things. We're looking at health care for all children in Minnesota. That's a battle, because when you do something right traditionally, what does government do? They penalize you. They reward those that don't do it right. In Minnesota, we put in MinCare. We started insuring our children and doing a good job. So what happens? You got the CHIP program out here. We're being denied our money because we're doing it right. So they send our money to the states that don't do it right. Well, that's what I'm trying to change in government. Let's start rewarding good behavior and penalizing bad behavior instead of what prevails mostly, and that's the opposite. We're telecommunications reform. We traveled throughout the state of Minnesota to greater Minnesota, the ag community, and we thought, what is it they're going to say to us that we need to do as government? We thought, well, of course it's going to be farm price. It's going to be agriculture. Wrong. It came back telecommunications. Rural Minnesota, rural United States needs to have the ability to hook up, to get on that superhighway, to be competitive. They said, Governor, that's what we need the most. Telecommunications to everyone so we can all play on the field. And then, of course, campaign finance reform was a huge issue, wasn't it, in this last election? But just as I predicted, now it's probably going to disappear. and it'll rear its head 4 years from now. Well, you know what? It's going to rear its head in Minnesota 2 years from now. Because I will tell you this, I haven't decided whether I'm going to run again. But if I do run again, I'm not going to raise $1, and I'm not going to spend $1. And I'll tell you why. If I can't win on my 4-year record, then I don't want the job. End of story. There's a lot of people who are skeptical. I don't know about you, but since I became governor, I haven't noticed our state of Minnesota's stature falling at all. Has it been reduced? I don't think so. You know, it's probably not often that a Minnesota governor is invited to spend a day at Harvard and meet with the Harvard economists, and then to speak at the Kennedy School of Government. And it was interesting when I was asked to go do that, I thought, wow, this is Harvard. They're asking me, I only went to high school, and I'm going to talk to the Kennedy School of Government, but I loved it up there. I'll tell you why. They brought me in, introduced me. They had all the jackals along the back row. At least you're laughing. Thank you. Thank you. Prove to me the media can have a sense of humor. Please, let me go back to Minnesota and feel that way. But they introduce you, and then all the media has to leave. And you're there with all the students at the John F. Kennedy School of Politics. And then you sit down and they bring in the pizza. And you sit and eat pizza and talk as informally as you can imagine. I was impressed. I like that. That is Jesse Ventura style. So maybe I will graduate from Harvard someday. It's been terrific. And how long has it been since a Minnesota governor was invited to lecture at the Richard Nixon Library, Georgetown University, Princeton, Johns Hopkins, Carleton, the Naval Academy, West Point? Although I'm not your typical governor, I'm very proud that I've received these invitations. I haven't been able to meet all of them, but I'm going to try before I'm done, because it would be an honor to do so and to represent my state of Minnesota. Can you think of the last time a Minnesota governor was invited to spend a night at the White House and it didn't cost me a thing? And even bigger than that, with a president who wasn't even from the same party. I was an independent, different party. Can you think of the last time a Minnesota governor was invited to advise a president-elect, who is now president, of another party on the subject of world trade? I'm honored. Can you think of the last time that a governor was elected with 37% of the vote, but has job approval ratings consistently over 70? I think that it was important to point out that while many may think this is the attention has been given to me as a celebrity factor, it's probably is more about the fact that a third-party governor won the race, more so than celebrity. But it also may be my straightforward style of dealing with things also. And maybe the success is partly of the fact that I've been in office now for 2 years, and I have not participated in one political money-raising fundraiser for myself. Now, let's go back to the XFL for a moment. Do you think there'd be controversy if every Saturday I was traveling throughout the country raising money for that war chest to get reelected? Not a word would be said. That's the status quo. That's normal. That's what politicians do. But oh my goodness, if you moonlight and hold down another job, one that you happen to do prior to getting elected, one that you might do when you leave public office, one that keeps you in touch with the private sector, that's novel, isn't it? Stay in touch with the private sector. But the great thing, I feel, is the ability that I can govern with no strings attached. None. People may disagree with my decisions. That's good. That's America. That's democracy. But the one thing they can be assured of is that the decisions are mine and mine alone, and no one's pulling them from the back room. I am not a puppet, nor will I ever be a puppet on a string. Of course, I get criticized for making money on the weekend, being an entertainer, but I'm going to do it. Who can tell me I can't? And I can't wait until the next governor comes along who maybe is a farmer and gets elected to government office as governor of Minnesota. Can you imagine the uproar when the farmer goes home on the weekend and sells his or her crop and works in the field that weekend? Oh, we'll be appalled, we'll be shocked. My, how could he do that? This is a 7-day-a-week job. How dare this farmer go keep track of his crops? Or maybe a stockbroker. Would they say the same thing if I was a hotshot stockbroker? Does that ban me from playing the stock market because I'm elected governor? I wonder what my critics would say, as I said, if I spent every weekend going around the countryside raising money for my campaign war chest. I'm sure they'd say it's perfectly fine, but you know what? I don't take bribes. Have you ever looked up the definition of the word bribery in the dictionary? You know what it says? One who gives someone of power something of value to influence their decision making. In the private sector, you go to jail for doing the bribery. In the public sector, in elected officials, it's the status quo. It's acceptable. But I can sleep well at night and always will. Who wants to do those fundraisers anyway, really? Think about them, eating those god-awful wieners that they have at them and pretend that you have a great interest in some lobbyist problem who has an amendment to a bill that you've never even heard of. And you have to pretend that you know what they're talking about. So, again, the people of Minnesota will know my record. They'll have known it for 4 years. So if I run again, I won't raise money and I won't spend money to get elected. And why will I do that, I think? Well, I'll never achieve what 1998 brought me. That euphoric night that we won. I don't think I could ever reach that again. So I have to challenge myself and challenge Minnesota to take another step, another bold step to lead the nation and to re-elect a governor who doesn't spend any money on himself to get elected. Imagine how that'll shock the world 2 years from now. I like that. I'll finish before I go to your question. Well, geez, there's a lot here yet. Anyway, I know I don't have to do, what do we, well, we're all right, Joe, we got a half hour. Anyway, the following is a quote from a book. And it says, the two-party system was given to this country, has given this country the war of Lyndon Johnson, the Watergate of Richard Nixon, and the incompetence of Jimmy Carter. Saying that we should keep the two-party system because it's working is like saying the Titanic voyage was a success because a few people survived on life rafts. The person who said that was quite outspoken, known to ruffle the feathers of the conventional politicians, and could not care less if he offended anyone with his opinions. The media loves him because he's always good for a provocative quote. He's the author of more than one book, and lately he's taken to writing poetry. The person who made that very provocative statement is Eugene J. McCarthy. A book that contains this quote was written by another unconventional politician who could not care less if he offends anyone with his opinions, and whose quotes are often sought by the media. The book is Do I Stand Alone? And the author is myself, Jesse Ventura. I put that quote in my book not to demean the presidents that Mr. McCarthy talked about, but because I respected Gene McCarthy. And I share his view that while we are indeed a great country, we can change and we can do better. In the last 2 years, I've experienced and learned a great deal. But the most important thing I've learned is this: I do not stand alone. There are so many people who stand with me. I meet them daily, and their encouragement couldn't be better well received. In fact, the other day, I met a group of seniors, and one of the elderly women came up to me and looked at me and said, "Give 'em hell, Harry." Few of us, and not me, might remember that quote. I wasn't born till 51, but I know of the quote. But rest assured, I will. Thank you very, very much. Uh-oh. Do you need that lowered? Do we got
Boy, I'll say if I were...
for every question? Okay.
Well, let lower a little bit so somebody can see that I'm here. How's this?
My back's good. I can...
We're going to work this out. A few questions about being a jackal.
All right.
No, actually, there's a number of questions here that you started to deal with about politics and your future, what you plan to do about governor. Now, you said you haven't made up your mind, won't. But when are you going to make up your mind?
For governor, when will I make up my mind? I will make up my mind July of next year, during when you have to go register and pay your money. A couple of reasons why. First of all, I will always be a Minnesotan. And the Democrat and Republican parties hold their conventions prior to July. I want to see who they're putting up. Because if I'm a Minnesotan and going to live there, I want to see who might be my next governor if I don't run. If I find that unacceptable, that will encourage the chance that I may run, depending on who they put forward. So I'll decide next July at that point in time on whether I run. Probably the last day of filing. After all, I don't have to raise money. Or we'll find out if I don't have to.
Well, this questioner is worried about the fact that you're not going to raise money because the questioner asks, if you don't raise campaign funds, how are you going to tell people of Minnesota how good you've been the last 4 years?
Well, I'm going to depend on the group called the Jackals. No, I think as governor, you're still in office, so you really have a bully pulpit. I mean, anything I do, I speak to. The media's there, and I'm just not going to get involved in... Will we all agree that as campaigning, these negative ads, can they get any worse than what you're seeing today? And to me, I would rather raise above that again. If I can't win on my 4-year record alone, then I don't want the job. I will move on and go back to the private sector. It's as simple as that. I think my record will speak for itself, and I think the novelty of actually seeing someone who won't go raise money and won't spend that money, I think will resonate very well with the Minnesota voter.
Since you're talking about deciding for governor, how about deciding for president? A number of people want to know if you have any thoughts about possibly running for president.
What do you think, honey? There's the veto right there. Do I have thoughts? I'm very humbled and honored, really, that there would be any consideration of myself to be the most powerful man in the free world. Never in my life did I ever think my name would be mentioned, and again, I say this with great humility and honor, that to even be considered is beyond any expectation I ever had in my life, ever. But quite frankly, at this point in life, I really don't want the job, and I look at it this way. We have a brand new president right now, President Bush, and we have to all give him a fair chance and see what he does. And he'll have 4 years, and at the end of 4 years, at that point in time, we'll see how he's done and what the situation is with the country and whether he's beatable. I mean, if you're going to run for the office, I run to win. And it's very difficult to unseat an incumbent. Actually, the election I should have ran and won is the last one, because you had no incumbent. And just as in Minnesota, when I ran for governor, you had no incumbent. So that opens it up. It's very hard to beat an incumbent, especially if the economy in the country is in good shape. Very difficult. But the other reason is this, too, is that To me, being president's an oxymoron in a way, because the president's the leader of the free world, but he or she have no freedom themselves. You live in a bubble. If you want to go to the local store at night and buy a root beer, they have to block the streets off and weld the manhole covers shut and do all of that just for you to go down there. And you have to honor that, because as much as I love my security people, and sometimes I turn them loose on the weekend just so I can break free and be alone and feel that way, feel freedom again. And I'm able to do that because, God forbid, if something happened to me, Minnesota would go on. But as a president, you have national security to think about. You have the nation and the world to think about, and you can't afford to have your own freedom in that manner, I don't think, when you have so many others are so dependent upon you completely. So you wouldn't be able to exercise the right of saying, oh, I'll just leave my Secret Service guys home today and go play golf. You know, you can't do that as the president. And I would find that extremely difficult, to live in that bubble for 4 years. And finally, the other reason, I don't know about you, but do you ever notice how they age? I mean, they always come in virile and young and full of energy. And 4 years later, a 50-year-old looks 70. And I turned 50 this summer. That's traumatic enough. And I, you know, I want to stay as good looking as I am for as long as I can. What was it? I think it was Joe Namath or somebody said it once. I can't wait till tomorrow because I get better looking every day. Somebody said that. I don't know who.
Well, you've just said it anyway. As you know, Governor, the Reform Party sort of imploded last year, to put it, I think, charitably. What chances do you think that you have, or anyone else has, of reviving the party as a viable third-party force?
Well, I think the Reform Party is dead in the water as we knew it. It was a shame, because there really was an opportunity that presented itself when Mr. Perot ran in 1992. It was remarkable. He got almost 20% of the vote across the nation. In Minnesota, he got almost 24% of the vote. We were fully prepared to continue on. We had former Colorado Governor Dick Lamb all ready to go in '96 to continue moving the party forward. We all respected what Ross Perot had done, but we felt now was the time. He had his chance. He accomplished a great deal, but in order to show that the party was growing, we felt it would be smart to come forward with a new candidate in '96, and Governor Lamb was fully prepared to do that. And then, of course, he got his knees cut out from under him at the convention, and we got Mr. Perot again. Well, it was at that point in time I started to question what the party was all about. Was it about truly a third-party movement, or was it about Mr. Perot and his movement? And then during my election, I received virtually no help whatsoever from the National Reform Party, nothing. Because I truly believe they truthfully didn't want me to win. Because the moment I won, the focus left Ross Perot and came to Jesse Ventura as the highest elected official in the party. And then, of course, we faced what we did. You know, the party was set up to where, for lack of better term in the corporate world, a hostile takeover could take place. And it did when Mr. Buchanan came in. And my belief is this, that for a third-party movement to be successful, it must be a centrist movement. It must be what maybe I am. I'm fiscally conservative, but I'm socially liberal. Well, the Republicans are conservative generally. The Democrats are liberal generally. I think most Americans sit where I sit. And if you look at what happens every election, what do the Democrats and Republicans do? They all of a sudden become centrist and come to the middle because they know that's where the election's won or lost. The hardcore left is always going to vote Democrat. The hardcore right's going to vote Republican. It's winning the center, which is what I did in Minnesota. The reason the Democrats and Republicans couldn't beat me in Minnesota is because I had the center occupied. They couldn't move in there, get those votes, and then go back to the wing again. So it's got to be a centrist movement if it's going to happen. Now, the future, yes, it's a big setback, but there are many of us that still believe strongly in a third-party movement, that it's healthy, that it's good for our nation, that it should happen. When we have so many diverse opinions today, how can there only be two? How can there only be two legitimate choices? And I believe it's got to happen at the grassroots level, not from the top down. It's got to happen out there in school board elections, mayors, state representatives, all of that, and the swell has to come from below or at the state level. Then when states, our party in Minnesota, the Independence Party, is doing terrific. We're fine. We fielded more candidates this last election than we ever had. We actually had primary runoffs, which we've never had before, where we had more than two candidates for one position. We had to have a primary. So we're growing. And I think that that's the way it's got to happen for the third party movement. It has to grow from the bottom up. And then as every state solidifies their third parties, if they can do that, then we should look at going national after we've solidified our states and gotten solid third party movements at the state level first before we attempt to go at the national level. Although, I will say, I ran into Angus King, the other governor from Maine, the other independent governor. Isn't it ironic that this last election, again, the highest voter turnout occurred in Minnesota and Maine, and they're the two states that have independent governors. But I had brought the subject up to Angus. He's a brilliant man, 4 years ahead of me, and I consult with him a lot. And I said to him, Angus, should you and I go for it? And we both met and said, this time had been the first time we'd seen each other since the election, and we both kind of had twinkles in our eye and said, you know what? We could have won it.
There are a number of questions here, Governor, that want you to assess the President Bush's first months in office and how you think he's doing. Here's one that says, rate it from 1 to 10. Just give us your assessment. Well,
first of all, I'm going to say this. It's far too early. I went through the same thing when I became governor. You're in office. He said, I've barely been in office, what, a month? Since he's been sworn in, a little over a month and a half. How do you assess anybody in a job of this importance that quickly? I went through it in Minnesota. They start assessing you after 30 days in office. But I would say this. I give him very high marks right now for his appointments. I see a lot of what he's doing is what I did in Minnesota. He's surrounding himself by solid people, solid administrators across the board. When you do that, your chance of failing decrease greatly. I think the greatest appointment he made, which gives him, I'll give him a 9 right now, so far. I think the greatest appointment he made was General Powell, without a doubt, because I went on the record a few years ago saying this is the man I want as my president. Well, if the general doesn't want to be president, the closest he can be to president is to be Secretary of State. And that, to me, was just an outstanding choice. Couldn't have been better on that end. And I think some of his other, Governor Tommy Thompson, another terrific choice. And Christine Todd Whitman, you notice the governors. He's going out and getting governors. And I think that's very bright. I think that's very smart of him. And I heard him speak today to us directly, and I liked very much what I heard, so he's getting a 9 from me right now. And by the way, there are no 10s.
I got to tell you, it's hard to elbow you aside. Do you have a position on President Bush's $1.6 trillion tax cut?
Yeah, give me my money. I'm not gonna sit here and try to dissect his budget because I'm not privy to it the way he is. Just as I would take offense if a mayor decided to dissect my state budget. You know, it's very difficult to do that if you're not sitting in the chair. But I will say this, I listened to his budget breakout today and it sounded identical to mine in Minnesota. Very limited targeted spending and tax cuts for everybody. And I agree. We are overtaxed, we've been overtaxed, and the way my philosophical viewpoint is, the way you spur the economy is putting money back in the private sector, not increasing government spending. That's not going to help the economy. You put that money back. I even suggested today, my personal suggestion to the president was, if he wants to, because tax cuts take about 1.5 years, 2 years before you really feel them. I told him that he ought to look at a tax rebate. of sending a check back as quick as he can if he wants to inject that economy, get it in the hands of the public by early summer, and they're going to go spend that money, I think, or they're going to put it back into the economy. So, and he said he would take that under serious consideration. And I think it would be a good move. As I said, they call them Jesse checks in Minnesota. So maybe nationally they'd call them George checks. I don't know.
As you know, Governor, former President Clinton has been in the news a great deal lately for his pardons. Former President Jimmy Carter said that the pardon of Mark Rich was disgraceful. Do you agree with that, and sort of give us your assessment of the way President Clinton left office?
Well, it's fun to be negative. You know, you can, my view of the situation is rather than criticizing the pardons he made, why don't we look at the system we have that allows it without any check or balance? I mean, let's be honest. If the president wants to pardon Charles Manson, he's free to do so, is he not? He's the president of the United States, and that's what the system says he can. Is it the right thing to do? Obviously not. Again, I don't know what went into these pardons. I'm busy running the state of Minnesota. I don't have time to view, you know, the background on the people that are pardoned, but I do face the same thing in the state of Minnesota. I sit on a pardon board, but our pardon board is different. Our pardon board is myself, Chief Justice Kathleen Blatz, who heads the Minnesota Supreme Court, and Attorney General Mike Hatch. And when we grant a pardon, it has to be unanimous by 3 people. If one of us dissents, that pardon isn't granted. So maybe we should really look at the system we have in place rather than criticizing the president who used it, whether we disagree or agree with how he used it. Maybe we ought to look at the system that's there, that maybe a president shouldn't have unconditional pardoning ability, not without some form of check and balance. I would prefer to bring that up for discussion rather than to sit and say, should he or should he not have pardoned so-and-so.
You knew this question would have to come. This questioner wants to know why you are so insulting to the media, on which you rely so heavily to promote your image and your messages. Just what is your beef with the media?
Well, my beef with the media is called accountability. No one holds them accountable. They have the First Amendment, which we all agree is probably the most important amendment to our Constitution, no doubt about that. But with freedom comes responsibility. And I feel very strongly that in many cases, the media is not accepting responsibility. Give you a quick case in point. Big headline in the Minneapolis Star-Tribune paper when my budget came out. Governor cuts education spending. That was a blatant lie. I'm giving more money to education than the previous budget, both higher ed and K through 12. Now, what the truth of that headline was, I didn't give them their wish list when how much they wanted of new spending. So the media reported that as a cut because they didn't get everything they asked for. Well, they admitted they were wrong, so they printed a retraction. Oh yeah, off the front page, on the second page, and a little thing about this big, to where no one sees that, and people still today are coming up to me in Minnesota saying, why are you cutting education? Because the damage was done. The damage was put into that public's mind through a headline in the paper that was untruthful, completely. And my view is that, sure, I like to rely on the media. Where would we be without them? But the point I'm saying to them is they need to accept some responsibility too. And far too often today, it's meat and potatoes stuff isn't sexy. So, and the media needs to be honest. What are they in business for? Making money. So the National Enquirer style media prevails a lot more. Just as I said, I came out here and testified in front of Congress on expanding trade with China, something that will affect everybody in this room in some way, shape, or form. Media didn't worry about that. They worried about the young and the restless. Three shifts we had to have out there just to bring them in. For me doing what? an acting job that I did before, inflated my ego because it's my favorite soap. You know, and I got a chance to be on with Victor, one of my heroes. You know, but that's why I'm challenging you, the media. Like I said, you be the judge and go home and look in the mirror of whether the name Jackal fits. Only you can be that judge, not me, not anyone else. You have to be that judge. But believe me, you pick a fight with me, I'll swing back. It's in my nature. What, Bill, what was our slogan? Do unto others before they do unto you.
I'm not picking a fight now, but I'd like to know, this question would like to know whether you might consider yourself a jackal, considering your rather testy and brutal comments regarding Rusty Tillman after the XFL game Saturday in Chicago.
Hey, I'm doing my job. Only in the XFL it's called entertaining. My brutal comments on Rusty, I thought he treated me rather brutally. I went down to congratulate him. He wouldn't talk to me and he walked off the field. You know, I didn't think my comments were that brutal to him. And the thing is about the XFL is we want to make it the fun league and we want to make it the total access league to where we will ask the questions, we will get the responses, and we will bring the heart back to the game, the heart and the emotion back to the game. And I respect Coach Tillman, he's a good coach. But again, my job is also to entertain and have a good time out there doing it. And many times they, you know, football and sports tend to think that they're more than what they really are. They're entertainment, they're a pastime, and that's all they are. And, you know, although they are a livelihood for the people that do it, certainly, and it's a living for those that are involved. Yeah, but again, I have nothing personal against Coach Tillman. He does a good job, and it makes for good television, I think, on Saturday night. So he's got to win some more games, though, because we do the feature game every week. And lately, his team hasn't been too featurous. What would you say? What would the word be? Futuristic? We'll make a word up then anyway. But they better win a few games because as we get down to the end of the season, the teams that are going to make the playoffs are going to be the ones on NBC. So he should worry more about that than me.
A number of people want to know if you think the XFL is going to survive. Its ratings are plummeting and it doesn't seem to be doing well right now, despite your best efforts.
Well, give yourself a hand. Give yourself a hand. Because a lot of it's been the media. Number one, the media dislikes Vince McMahon with a passion. Number two is you're missing what it's about. See, what happened was the media got fooled again, just like when I ran for governor. None of them predicted I would win, and then when I did win, they were taken back because all of a sudden the public started to question their expertise. Well, if you're the experts, how come you didn't know this guy was going to win? Right? Well, what happened with the XFL was this. The media assumed that it was going to be football players hitting each other with chairs. They thought it was going to be WWF wrestling. And when it turned out, and that's what they were prepared for, when it turned out they were fooled, well, then it was, well, but it's not the NFL. The talent isn't as good, blah, 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 blah. We never said we were going to be the NFL. Never. All we came about was that we saw an opening. If you're like I am and you're a football fan, what happens when the Super Bowl ends? What happens to you that next weekend? You go through severe withdrawals. You sit at home in Minnesota, the snow's coming down, and you go, oh my God, there's no football. What am I going to watch this weekend? Well, we felt that. We thought, let's give another league. And what you're truly missing is that this league is about opportunity. This league is about players who want to play the game and want to continue to play the game because they love it. And it's about the fact that, you know, I'd like to call it the Rudy League. How many saw Rudy, the kid who wanted to go to Notre Dame and play football? and his greatest thing was just one day running down that tunnel. You think these players in our league, the greatest thing they could imagine be one day maybe to step out on the NFL? That one of those scouts is going to see him and give him the opportunity? And it's also about players who, maybe you don't realize it, but we have one player, Elias, on the New York team. He's a victim of the NFL union. Now, I thought unions were to protect people's jobs. I thought that's why there were unions. This particular player is, I think, 5 or 6 years in the NFL. Well, they now have a minimum of what he's required to be paid. And because of salary cap, he got cut. And he said, but I'll play for less. It didn't matter. It would have broken the collective bargaining agreement. The union requires a certain minimum. So here you have a player who still wants to play, who's now victim of the NFL union. And his football career is over, if not for the XFL. So I would really ask the media, look at these players and the heart they're playing with. I asked Coach Al Luganbill of LA, who's been around pro football for a long time. I said, what's it like coaching here? He said, it's nirvana. It's a coach's dream. I said, why is that, Al? He said, because there's no egos. When the center gets paid the same as the quarterback, right down the line, and what is the essence of the league? It's a we league. They get a flat pay rate, and if they win, I know you're going to cut me off, but I'm going to finish. If they win, the team gets a bonus. They all get bonus money, where the other league's an I league. If I run for 1,000 yards, if I catch 100 passes, I'll get the big contract. Doesn't matter about my teammates. I'll get the big money. Our league is a league where to prosper, your team must prosper. So it's a we league. It's looking at getting a victory for the team rather than the individual. So bear that in mind and possibly look at the XFL in a different light.
Well, before I ask you the last question, I have a couple of things. One is a certificate of appreciation for your appearance here today, Governor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And you didn't even make fun of me.
No.
That's good.
No, there's no jackal in there, no,
Okay.
sir. And a press club mug, which you now have a collection of them.
Yes, yeah, 2 of them.
And the last question I would like to ask, which was sent up by someone up here at the head table, ask, your wife has said she didn't realize how smart you were until you ran for governor. How did you hide it from her?
Actually, I was smart enough to hide the checkbook from her for a long time. So how did I hide it from her? Honey, how dare you? Are you going to get it later? Okay. How did I hide it from her? I guess it's a case that I would say, quite honestly, she knew me very much through most of our life as being a very physical person, that I made my living very much with my body. And I probably shocked her when I showed her that I can also make my living with my mind. And that, we're not always just muscular guys with no brains. And so I would probably say that's what shocked her, the transformation of going from a very physical life of earning a living again with my body to where one now, when you get 49, your body tells you clearly you better use your mind. So the switch over that way. So, and maybe I was never challenged to the point of the challenge I've gotten from being governor. And so maybe she never really saw the mental challenge before of doing what I do now as governor. So, but believe me, and I say this in all honesty, if First Lady Terry Ventura ran for governor, I wouldn't run, because she's the one person I can't beat in Minnesota.
Governor, I'd like to thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate that.
And thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to thank you all for coming today. I'd also like to thank National Press Club staff members Melinda Cook, Pat Nelson, Joanne Booz, Melanie Abdel-Dermot, and Howard Rothman for organizing today's luncheon, and also thanks to the NPC Library for their research. We are adjourned, and thank you. Appreciate it.